Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you this morning.
Happy October.
Happy October.
1st October. Yeah.
No, well, we had last week was our first October podcast, but we're well into October now. We've
you know what it feels like? It feels like we're careening into the holidays, right? I mean,
that's right.
We're just hurtling into the holidays as quickly as we can.
And just speaking of the holidays, that kind of is an interesting segue to the topic that we're going to cover today, because we're going to talk a little bit about tantrums and meltdowns and all of those challenging emotional experiences that our youngsters give us sometimes.
Right. This is one of those problems that continues to occur both in homes, but also in classrooms. Yeah. These become very disruptive, and teachers are reporting that they're experiencing more and more of these in younger children. It's typically in preschool and the early primary grades where kids are having these emotional meltdowns.
Right.
We want to do a couple of things. We want to talk about how to manage them. First thing we want to do is differentiate sort of the garden variety temper tantrum from what we call emotional meltdowns, because there is a difference between the two. It's an important difference in terms of how you handle them.
Right. It's a pretty significant difference. But, we've talked in previous podcasts about stages in life, periods in life where we undergo significant changes. And one of those times when our little ones go through significant changes is around the age of 2.5, somewhere around there. And their brain goes through this massive adjustment. And so it's not surprising that, just after the age of 2, you see an explosion in language use.
Yeah, right.
An explosion in gross and fine motor skills. And we see all of those skills beginning to emerge around 2.5. And it's around that time, just like our communication skills explode, our gross and fine motor skills explode, so do our emotional and social skills. And so around that stage in life, kids start to try to pull away from their parents. One of their favorite words is no. They want to control things. They want to be able to manage things. And so the kid goes from this sweet, adoring little
chair, right?
And all of a sudden now they are a tyrant.
Yeah, when kids are born, when children are first born, they just don't have the neurons. They're not born with the neurons to do kindergarten, and they're very dependent on us. They'll cry and they'll cry to get their needs met. But at about age 2.5, there's this explosion of new neurons, and those are the neurons they're going to use to learn how to ride a bicycle and go to kindergarten and do all the things that a 5 or 6 year old can do. And they also develop competence. They have increased competence because they have increased neurons. They have the neurons to do things. So when kids, they call them the terrible 2s or terrible 3s. When kids go through this stage, when they start to say no, they're not defiant. They're simply saying, no, I can do this myself now. Or no, I really want to do this myself.
Right.
But that word no, because it usually comes with a little bit of emotion back, it's a hot no, frightens parents. And they want to slam the door on this, this kid's becoming defiant. He's not becoming defiant, he's becoming competent. And it's
because parents use no as a form of control. They perceive the child's use of no as a way to control, and as though the child is trying to control them. And it's not so much that the child is trying to control them, is that, as you said, the child is trying to demonstrate some competence, that they have some ability to do something on their own.
They begin to go to the bathroom by themselves. Think of it. It's about the time that kids get toilet trained. They can do these very personal tasks on their own now. They have the competence, they have the biological wherewithal to do these things on their own. And so the resistance that you feel as a parent is not disobedience, It's not defiance, it's confidence.
Right.
Think of it as these kids are trying to do things on their own. That's all this is about. But they can get pretty worked up.
Right.
And there are times when, if they don't get what they want, they certainly don't have the language skills yet to articulate exactly what they need. So they resort to more primitive means. So they reach into their toolkit, which at age 2 or 3 doesn't have a lot of tools.
Right.
They reach into their toolkit and they pull out the temper tantrum. Say, maybe this will work. Maybe if I throw myself on the floor, maybe I'll get my mother's attention. Maybe I'll get somebody's. Okay. So they hurl themselves on the floor and they have one of these emotional moments that we call a temper tantrum.
And it's usually at the most ideal time, like in the line at the grocery store, or
in the frozen food section.
Right.
Right.
But so far all of this is normal
Stuff. Right.
This is typical stuff that almost every parent goes through, almost every child goes through, and it's just what, as you said, it's just the tools that the kid has to be able to get their needs met. An infant only has one tool. An infant can only cry. That's the only thing that an infant can do.
That's all a baby can do.
Right? Yeah. As they get older and they get a little bit bigger and stronger and have a little bit, their skill set grows a little bit. Now we can get into these, full-on temper tantrums, but it's just a tool to communicate.
That's all. Right. And so what we advise parents to do is just ignore the tantrum, because what you want the child to learn is that, this tool doesn't work very well. So if it's not going to work, if this is, I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to get rid of it. Okay. Like we do with any tool. Right. So that's why we tell parents, just ignore these tantrums. They're going to go away. Just show the child that they don't work and the child will stop using them. Okay.
Right.
However, there are kids who are wired differently and they don't let go of these tantrums. And in fact, they will escalate and move toward what we call an emotional meltdown. Okay.
Right.
And that's a very different set of circumstances than a typical garden variety temper tantrum.
Right. And let's be fair from the outset. Sometimes, especially in cases where parents don't ignore the temper tantrums and things like that.
Right.
Normal temper tantrums can, they can accelerate and they can grow and become what we look at as meltdowns. They're still temper tantrums, but they're temper tantrums that were learned because it's, when temper tantrums aren't ignored, the child says, this is a form of communication that's effective. And so then they start to use it more, and they start to use it more effectively and more loudly and more physically. And so when parents don't use those healthy strategies of ignoring and not giving in, then we can get to a very similar place. But even then, those meltdowns that are sort of exaggerated temper tantrums are still different than the emotional meltdowns that we're talking about here.
That's right. Right. If you're a parent or grandparent, any kind of a caretaker, and you've ignored the temper tantrum, done the typical ignoring and walk away, and that it doesn't take many tries for a kid to learn that it's not going to work. I mean, you do it a handful of times, and the child learns that these tantrums don't work, so I'll try something else. If you've religiously ignored, and the tantrums continue or they become more intense, okay, and there are kids, because of their emotional makeup, their tantrums have a very different flavor. There's an intensity to them that you don't see in a regular temper tantrum, and it's alarming to parents. It will alarm most parents. They'll hit siblings, they'll hit parents. There's just a different morphology, a different taste, a different flavor to an emotional meltdown, and it's part of a child's emotional regulation. And that's what the parents can key in on, is that a temper tantrum occurs in a child who handles most things quite well, uneventfully. Okay, the emotional system seems to be working. They seem to be able to regulate their emotions, do the things we ask them to do. Kids who have emotional meltdowns, the emotional meltdown is a symptom of emotional dysregulation. And you're probably going to notice it in other areas as well. You're going to notice that this child, and parents will come in and say, this child is just different from my other kids. There's an intensity. They're more strong-willed. They're more determined. They are more defiant. For no reason. It's not because they're trying to get something. It's just they don't have the emotional control that the other kids have.
And they do see it in other areas, because what they'll often say is that he or she is just more emotionally reactive to everything. He gets more sad than you would expect over sad things. He gets more excited over exciting things than you would expect. There's an exaggeration to all emotions, not just the temper tantrum type emotions, the not getting what you want emotions. It's all over. And so ignoring in these situations don't really work, because what's really happening is the child is just losing emotional control. And now, even if you ignore it, the child is still out of control. And so we're working to identify some new ways to manage some of this. And the article that we're pulling from today is from Attitude Magazine, and it's called "When Angry Kids Lash Out: How to Diffuse Explosive Reactions." And there's some good advice in here, not too dissimilar from some of the stuff we've talked about from like Ross Green and some of the other people who have worked with and talked about explosive kids and explosive reactions to things.
That's right. And so if just to review, a tantrum is a tool that a kid will use to get something, but between the tantrums, most of the behavior is okay. A meltdown is about emotional dysregulation. It's an intense emotional response that could include aggressive behavior, destroying toys, destroying property, breaking things. So it's a very, very different phenomenon. And temper tantrums affect the child and the parent for a few minutes. A meltdown can affect the entire family. I mean, it disrupts the entire family because everybody can get drawn into it.
And for a longer period of time.
And for a longer, right. It could go on for a temper tantrum lasts for a couple of minutes, maybe. Okay. If you walk away, it lasts for a few seconds. But a meltdown can go on for an hour or more.
Right.
So this article presents what we might call best practices. What should I do in the event that I'm dealing with an emotional meltdown?
Right.
And what we did is we broke the advice into 3 parts.
Right.
What do you do before the meltdown? What do you do during the meltdown? And what do you do after the meltdown?
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying, and it's something that we as a culture, I think it's safe to say that we're not really good at, and that is prevention. We tend to be a very reactive culture, and so we tend to, it's not a problem until it's a problem, and so we wait until the problem arises, and then we do something. But the best approach, the best strategy is prevention. There are things that you can do just by kind of sitting and thinking about things a little bit. There are things that you can do that will significantly decrease the likelihood or the risk of some of these meltdowns. If you know that every time you go to Walmart, he's going to ask for something, and when you say no, he's going to have a meltdown, you might want to consider not taking him to Walmart. I worked at a school, and we had a kid that every Friday he had a horrible meltdown, and we were trying to tease this apart and figure out what was going on. And it didn't take long to realize that he had a meltdown every time he didn't earn Fun Friday, and he doesn't earn Fun Friday because of something that happened on Tuesday or Wednesday. But he doesn't earn it. And when he doesn't earn it, he can't handle it. And he ends up having to be sent home early in the day because he completely loses control.
Right. And so that's right. So the most important thing is to prevent. Look at your day. Where are the hot spots? Where are the bad spots? Where's your nuclear hour? Who are playmates that are not good to be with? And you have to go through all that stuff. Once a meltdown occurs,
Right.
Okay, so you do all you can to prevent. Sometimes you can't. Once it occurs, there's a couple of important steps you can take.
Right.
One is you have to learn. You and the child have to learn some de-escalation strategies. How do I, when I see the meltdown coming, what can I do?
Right.
Well, one thing you can do is learn how to de-escalate. What
Right.
does that mean? You have to remain calm. If you
Right.
get worked up, you're gonna make it worse. It's
How
throwing
many
gas
times?
on the fire.
Absolutely. How many times do parents say, well, he gets going and man, the parent gets pulled into it and then the parent becomes almost dysregulated.
Right. That's
And they
right.
get really agitated and angry and they get in their kid's face and they will, propose threats. If you don't stop right now, this is going to happen. You're talking about a kid who's emotionally dysregulated and then you're threatening him. What do you think is going to, it's going to continue the dysregulation clearly.
Yeah. So what you have to do, de-escalation, is everybody move back, don't reduce confrontations, lower your voice, get at the eye level of the child, give the child some distance. Don't get up close because it's going to be, the child's going to perceive it as a threat. So don't do or say anything that the child might perceive as threatening behavior. So first of all, you de-escalate. Second, you can create diversions. If you create a diversion, the diversion allows the child to regain control of something, okay? And because that's what you want, all right? And the other thing is, you have to avoid trying to do consequences or trying to argue with the child or trying to reason with the child. It's like you can't do anything about a hurricane when the winds are blowing at 150 miles an hour, okay? You can't do anything. It's too late to prevent, and you're not ready for cleanup. Back up, just back up, let the storm occur. You can deal with everything else in the third phase, which is what do you do after the event occurs?
Right. One of the important aspects I think about creating a diversion, giving them a way to regain control and, maybe even distracting them from what has upset them. This is not a time, while we're not going to punish, we're not going to apply consequences and things like that. We also have to avoid making promises for things that are inappropriate. So often parents will say, the kid is melting down and the parent will say, hey, do you want to go to the store and look for that new figure that you want or that new toy that you want or that whatever? You want to go to McDonald's and get some? No,
that's not a diversion.
Right. That's not a diversion. That's a reward.
That's right.
So you have to avoid that as well. We can't get ourselves into a situation where we're offering, incentives in such a way that the kid could potentially see it as, well, when I melt down, I get something that I want.
Right. And remember that a meltdown is an emotional event. So don't bring in the cognitive cavalry, okay? Don't try to reason, don't try to talk, don't try to explain, don't try to threaten. Those are all cognitive things. And this is an emotional event. So you have to think of it, what would you do? And that's why you back up. That's why you back away from this and don't do anything that will make it worse. Now, after the event occurs, after the meltdown occurs, and it could be an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours later, now what do? Well, the first thing you don't do is you don't punish. Parents say, well, there has to be a consequence. No, there doesn't have to be a consequence. This was emotional dysregulation, not done on purpose. And what you want to do is you want to, rather than punishing the child for having the meltdown, is to teach them how to manage these meltdowns. The meltdowns are going to continue. You're not going to stop them, okay? So what you have to do is you have to teach the child how to manage these things. So not punishment, but teaching.
Absolutely. I don't understand the punishing. In my mind, when a kid becomes dysregulated, sometimes they'll make a mess, they'll throw things or they'll knock things over. Picking those things up and cleaning up the mess is consequence enough. That's as much as the punishment needs to be. Instead, that's just taking responsibility for what you did. That's not a punishment. So yeah, focusing on de-escalation, focusing on, wow, we got really upset there. Remember, we use these strategies. When we start to feel that way, we do this or we do that. And but like you said, we're not going to punish these out of them. We're not going to punish them well enough to where they'll stop happening. So
you're not going to punish. You're absolutely right. You're not going to punish your way out of this. I mean, I know that's I know that tendency. I know that parents say, well, we have to have a consequence. No, this is something you teach your child to manage. You're not going to punish your way through this. Okay? Right. It doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And so the consequence is you have to do some teaching. Right. You have to teach this child how to manage his emotions a little bit better. Remember, the child has the problem here. The child is unable to regulate their emotions. So your job as a parent is not to punish. Your job as a parent is to instruct, is to teach.
Absolutely. And this isn't a time either to be, I guess I'll just use the word nitpicky, because, Richard, I know we worked with a couple of families together where, the kid will have a meltdown, and, we teach them the strategy of, okay, when you start to get upset, what you need to get away from the situation. So go to your room and just, deal with it in there. And so, they start to get upset. So they stomp out of the room and they go in, they slam their door, and then they deal with it. And then afterward, the parent comes to them and says, you need to stop slamming your door. Well, you know what? You can slam the door all day long if you're using the skill that we're teaching right now. We can deal with the slamming door thing later. Right now, we're focusing on, hey, you did a great job of removing yourself from the situation and doing exactly what we're working on. So, great job. And now let's clean up this mess, or let's take care of this. What's the problem?
And you can picture this happening, that the kids is having this, ready to have this emotional meltdown, and the parent says, why don't you just go to your room and cool off? And the child will say something, oh my God. Then the parent gets angry about, oh my God, they get angry about it. No. That's just, let it go. Yeah. Deal with one problem at a time. Otherwise, you're going to create a whole series of little fires that you're then going to have to put out. Just deal with one thing at a time. Right. Teach your child how to manage this emotional dysregulation, these emotional meltdowns.
Right. Because that is not disrespectful. That is not being disrespectful. That is really working hard to control probably what he really wants to say, and not saying that and saying,
that's right. Oh my God, for a kid to say, oh my God, Mom, that's a lot better than a physical attack. Right. Okay. So count your blessings. That's not going to be a problem. You can deal with that later. Don't deal with it during the hurricane while the wind is blowing.
Right.
So one of the approaches
go ahead.
Yes. Well, one of the approaches that people are finding now that has become very useful in managing these tantrums is something called responsive parenting. The idea is that you want to respond rather than react. Okay, because most of us as parents, and I'm guilty, we tend to react rather than to respond. And so we want to use something called responsive parenting.
Right. And part of that, we have to reframe the way that we're thinking.
You have to reframe your own thinking as a parent.
Right. Parents often have a hard time understanding that so many of the issues that they're seeing with their kids, and so many of the things that are going on with their kids, it's really rooted in how the parent, him or herself, perceives what's happening. Is the child being disobedient, or is the child, was the child distracted and didn't pay attention to what you said? He's not being disobedient and not hearing the instructions are two very different things. The behavior is exactly the same. The things aren't getting done, but the cause or the reason behind it is very different. And so a lot of that comes from the perspective of the parents. So remember that the child's not giving you a hard time. The child is having a hard time.
That's right. Because as parents, we think my child, it's not the child who's giving you a hard time. It's the child who's having a hard time. This emotional meltdown is a signal to you that your child is having a hard time regulating their emotions.
Right.
So you have to help them learn how to do that,
Right.
not punish them, because this has nothing to do with you. This is their inability to regulate their emotions. So you respond, but you respond in a compassionate way. This is a
Right.
skill that this child doesn't possess.
Right.
You wouldn't punish her for not being able to read. So you can't punish her for not being able to regulate her emotions. You
Right.
teach her how to read, you teach her how to regulate emotions.
Right.
Stop punishing, start teaching.
Right. The second thing to consider is that, behavior, and we've said this from the beginning of this podcast, behavior is just a form of communication.
That's right.
That's all it is.
Yep.
You can speak, that's usually the preferred form of communication, but behavior is a form of communication as well. And when a child is dysregulated, or even when an adult is dysregulated, let's be honest, they tend to resort to more behavioral, physical things than they do verbal things. It's just the way that the brain works. It's much more difficult to access those regions of the brain that's going to formulate and compose an appropriate response when you're upset. But it's really easy to walk away or to slam something down. That's a much easier way to communicate that.
Right. Yeah, I was giving a talk one time, and I was kind of talking about this stuff. All of a sudden, some guy approached the podium, and I thought, "What's this about?" I thought, I'm not a world leader, so I wasn't worried about assassination. But I thought, what does this guy want? He came up and he laid a little slip of paper on the podium and walked away. And after I did the talk, I looked at it, and on the slip of paper, he had written, "Behavior is the language of a child's emotions."
Right.
And I thought, good point. That's what they're trying to communicate with us. They don't have the language skills to express clearly what they're feeling. So they use the tools, just like a little 2 or 3-year-old uses a temper tantrum. Kids will use these other tools. This is dysregulation. They're using the tools that they have. So what our job is to find out what they're trying to communicate. Teach them skills, but the emotional meltdown is a form of communication.
Right.
Figure out what they're trying to communicate.
Right.
And the third step that we have talked about many times, and you and I know, share this viewpoint. Misbehavior is the sign of an unmet need.
Absolutely.
So we call it misbehavior, but it's really an unmet need. Ross Greene talks about that eloquently.
Yeah.
These are skills that a kid just doesn't have. They can't do this stuff.
Yeah, either they it's a skill that they don't have, or they have a problem that just doesn't have a solution right now, or they have a problem that hasn't been solved.
They can't figure out. That's right. They get confronted by something that they don't know how to deal with. And instead of coming, wouldn't it be nice if your 7-year-old would come to you and say, "Mom, I'm starting to dysregulate right now because I'm having a very hard time." Most adults don't do that. I mean, adults will argue with each other and get angry. So how can we expect more of children? So it's probably that the child has some problem that they can't resolve, or there's some skill deficit that they have. And that's what we need to figure out. What are we dealing with? It's not misbehavior. It's a sign of something that they're not able to manage. And so they have a meltdown.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we put the links in the show notes to a couple of articles that talks about these issues. And we do encourage you to read them and to check them out. And, let us know if you have any questions or anything else from them that, raise questions or inquiries for you. And we'll talk about them some more in the future.
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing to remember is that, we talk about reading as a skill that you need to teach. It takes a long time to teach a kid how to read. It takes a long time to learn the multiplication tables. And it's going to take a long time to teach kids how to manage these emotional meltdowns. There is no quick solution.
Right.
Punishment isn't going to work. Teaching, you have to teach, and you have to respond calmly. And it just takes time to work these out. They eventually will work themselves out. They might come back in the early teenage years, but eventually these meltdowns are going to go away. Most adults don't have meltdowns. Okay?
Absolutely.
So eventually we're going to get them under control. But parents need to respond rather than to react, and to be patient, because it's not going to change quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, that's it for today. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.